Ito ang ambag ko.
Ako.
Ikaw.
Lahat tayo.
Sama-sama nating
Mayaangat ang bayan.
Basta't sama-sama tayo.
Sa pag-ingat buhay.
Para sa ating hanap buhay.
Mas hugas iwas.
Magandang umaga, Pilipinas. Mahigit isang taon na pong nakakalipas nang tinalaga ang inyong abang lingkod ng ating presidente na ipakulong ang mga opisyales at iba pang mga partido na pumasok sa ang tinawag na presidenteng maanumalyang mga concession tungkol sa tubig na ipinasok ng gobyerno sa Manila Water at sa Maynilad Water. Well, matapos po isang taon, kinukumpir pa po natin na natapos na po ang renegosyasyon ng 1997 MWS Concession Agreement kasama ang Manila Water Corporation at ang susunod naman po ay ang Maynilad. Isang revised concession agreement ang nabuo na nagbibigay ng mas magandang serbisyo ng tubig sa Metro Manila at advantageous sa pamahalaan at consumers. Patunay ito ang interes ng mga Pilipino ang nasa isip at puso ng ating presidente. Nagsilbing model contract para sa renegotiation na ito ang kontrata ng New Clark City Joint Venture Agreement ng Business Conversion Development Authority or BCDA as advised by the Asian Development Bank. Ito ang mga mahalagang probisyon ng nasabing kontrata. Una, para proteksyonan ang interes ng national government, pagtanggal ng government non-interference clauses. Ang ibig po sabihin kasi dito, kapag nakialam ang gobyerno para sa kapakanan ng mga mamamayan, po pwedeng maidemanda ang gobyerno. At sa katunayan, ilang beses na nilang dinimanda ang gobyerno, no? Bagamat ang gobyerno ay gumagalaw lamang para sa interes ng mga mamamayan. Pagkilala sa Manila Water bilang public utility which makes it more accountable sa pamahalaan at sa publiko. Dahil kapag ikaw po isang public utility, ito po isang pribilehiyo at hindi karapatan. Pagtanggal ng mga probisyon na nagko-compromise sa medium at long-term liabilities or contingent liabilities na tinatawag tulad ng pagtanggal ng performance undertaking ng national government para sa future debt. Wala na po yung probisyon na bagamat pribado ang mga kumpanyang nagbibigay ng tubig, abay, yung mga pagkakautang nila ay magiging pagkakautang pa ng ating gobyerno. Lahat ng utang at mga gastos o expenditure ng concessionaire ay kinakailangan ma-review at maaprubahan po ng regulatory office na MWSS. Lahat po ng fully recovered assets ay kinakailangang mailipat agad sa pamahalaan para matiyak na walang double payment at the end of the contract. Kasi ang kinikita po nila ay nakabase po doon sa halaga ng kanilang asset, no? Pag nabayaran na yan, kinakailangan tanggalin na yan ng mas maliit na ang kikitain ng mga water concessionaire providers. Nalimitahan na rin po ang material adverse government action sa mga aksyon ng ehekutibo para hindi mananagot o liable ang national government sa mga bagay na outside ng kanyang control. Kung nadimanda po ang mga water concession agreement at nagkaroon ng desisyon ng ating hukuman, bakit naman kinakailangan gobyernong managot doon kung meron naman talagang pananagutan ang mga concessionaires? Para naman po maprotektahan ang interes ng consumer, yung corporate income tax ay hindi matcha-charge sa consumer. Hindi tulad ng dating concession agreement. Dati nga po, kaya nagalit si Presidente, mantakin nyo, kumita na nga, ayaw pa magbayad ng tax. Ngayon po, magbabayad na sila ng tax. Nagkaroon po tayo ng tariff freeze hanggang December 31, 2022. Ibig sabihin, hindi po nila po pwede taasan ang kanilang taripa hanggang 2022. Ang tariff adjustment for inflation, kasi meron po yan, no, para naman hindi madihado sila, kinakailangan yung kanilang taripa ay adjusted doon sa tinatawag nating inflation. Ngayon po, 2/3 ng consumer price index, hindi katulad ng dati na 100% inflationary impact. So, ibig sabihin, kung 3% pong inflation, 2% lang ang pwede nilang maitaas. Pagtanggal ng foreign currency differential adjustment na magre-resulta ng pagbabago ng tariff increases. No? Dati-rati po kasi yung pagbago ng forex, no, ay sagot ng gobyerno. Parang ginagarantiya natin na walang inflation, walang deflation. Ngayon po, wala na pong ganyang provision. So, kampante po kami na dahil po dito sa bagong concession agreement, revised concession agreement sa Manila Water, protektado din po ang gobyerno at ang ating mga consumers. Susunod pong magkakaroon ng renegosyasyon ang Maynilad Water. Balitang IATF naman po tayo, no? Tulad ng aking inanunsyo nung Sabado, inaprubahan po ng Pangulo ang rekomendasyon ng inyong IATF na i-extend hanggang April 11, 2011 ang umiiral na Enhanced Community Quarantine or ECQ sa Metro Manila, Bulacan, Cavite, Laguna at Rizal. Sa panahon ng ECQ, papaintingin natin ang Prevent, Detect, Isolate, Treat, Rehabilitation or PDIR strategy. Magkakaroon ng daily monitoring at reporting ang National Task Force or NTF kasama ang implementers ukol dito. Mamaya ay makakasama natin si Yusek Vergere para sagutin ano ba ang mababago sa ilalim ng umiiral na ECQ at bakit hindi business as usual ito. Tataasan din natin ang bilang ng dedicated COVID-19 hospitals sa isolation, quarantine at health facilities. Sasamahan po tayo bukas po, sang-ayon kay Secretary Villar, yung ating 110 beds para sa mga pasyente ng COVID-19 sa Quezon Institute ay bubuksan na. Ito po yung larawan. Ito po ay modular hospital na 110 units para sa moderate at severe na mga kaso ng COVID. Dadagdagan naman natin ang kapasidad ng ating contact tracing para mag-improve ang efficiency natin. Kukuha tayo ng mga tao mula sa Department of National Defense, sa Department of Interior and Local Government at Department of Labor and Employment para sa ating contact tracing efforts. Nagsasama-sama na po ang lahat ng ahensya ng gobyerno para mas mapainting ang ating contact tracing. Palalakasin din po natin ang pagpapatupad ng current protocols at guidelines sa local level sa pamamagitan ng pag-review ng mga umiiral ng mga local ordinances at executive orders tulad ng pagbibigay ng community service bilang other form of penalty. Kinakailangan po talaga ipatupad yung mask, hugas, iwas at bakuna at kinakailangan mapatawan ng parusa yung mga hindi sumusunod. Pero ang ating panawagan, kung po pwede, community service po ang ating ipataw na parusa. Maaari naman pong ma-relax ang kasalukuyang community quarantine classification. Nakasalalay po ito sa mga indicators na ating nabanggit. Kaya naman tinitiyak ng DILG, DOLE at National Task Force Group for the Management of Returning Overseas Filipinos na maisusumite ang kinakailangan na tamang datos mula sa mga lokal na pamahalaan, workplaces at establishments at returning overseas Filipinos at OFWs. Tungkol naman po sa rapid antigen testing, inaprubahan po ng inyong IATF na bumili ang Office of the Civil Defense gamit ang kanilang Quick Response Fund ng paunang 500,000 pieces ng rapid antigen test na inauthorize ng Food and Drug Administration. Gagamitin ito kasama ng ating RT-PCR dito po sa NCR Plus, pati na rin po sa mga probinsya ng Pampanga at Batangas. Samantalang inadap ang sumusunod na joint recommendations ng DOLE at DTI. Ito po ay para sa mga workplaces. Una, pagpapalakas ng pagpapatupad at monitoring ng pagsunod sa minimum health standards sa workplaces. Pangalawa, pag-rollout sa Safety Seal Certification Program at pag-adapt nito sa mga pribadong kumpanya, mga hotels, business establishment at public transportation units. Ibig sabihin, pag meron pong ganitong seal, yan po ay assurance na sumusunod sa minimum health standards at dapat lang po nating tangkalikin yung merong mga ganitong seal. Pangatlo, paghihikayat sa mga mamamayan na mag-report sa mga establishmento na hindi sumusunod. Inaprubahan din ng inyong IATF ang request ng Region 6 na pangsamantalang isuspinde ang inbound passenger travel mula Metro Manila at mga probinsya ng Bulacan, Cavite, Laguna, Rizal, Cebu City at Davao City hanggang April 10, 2021. Kasama po sa Region 6 ang Boracay. Naglabas din ng inyong IATF ng amended Omnibus Guidelines on the implementation of community quarantine in the Philippines as of April 3, 2021. Ilan lang po ito sa mga amendments. Marami pa po yan, pero ipapublish po natin yan. Isinama sa Health Emergency and Frontline Services ang mga nasa HMOs, health insurance providers, disaster risk reduction management officers, at public safety officers sa full on-site capacity sa ilalim ng mga lugar na nasa ECQ. Idinagdag din po ang hardware, office supplies at bicycle shops sa essential retail trade and service establishments with full on-site capacity sa mga ECQ areas. Isinama rin po ang public transport providers and operators sa full on-site capacity sa mga ECQ areas. Ang janitorial services ay kasama na rin sa on-site skeleton workforce sa ECQ areas. Dinagdagan ang mga sumusunod sa ilalim ng ongoing skeleton workforce sa ECQ areas. Una, yung mga engaged repair at maintenance ng motorized at non-motorized vehicles kasama ang pagbebenta ng spare parts. Pangalawa, employment activities na may kinalaman sa recruitment at placement sa mga sektor na pinayagan. Pangatlo, mga guro, mga propesor at iba pang staff na may kinalaman sa online, offline, and flexible classes, completion of grades at processing ng student credentials, requirements at documents. Pang-apat, mga abogado na magbibigay ng legal representation. Samantala, itinaas sa 18 mula sa dating 15 anyos ang pupwedeng lumabas sa MECQ at GCQ. COVID-19 updates naman po tayo. Nasa na po ang Pilipinas pagdating sa daily confirmed COVID-19 cases as of April 3, 2021. Ito po makikita niyo po ito. Kinukumpira po ang mga kaso sa buong mundo. At ang Pilipinas po ay kulay pula. Okay? Bagamat sumipa po ang kaso dito sa ating bayan, makikita nyo naman po, in relation to the world, mababa pa po ang ating mga kaso in relation to the rest of the world. Kung ikukumpira po sa India, sa Brazil, Estados Unidos, France, Italy, at Germany. Okay? So, yan po ay galing po sa Our World in Data, Johns Hopkins University. Wag po tayo magpapalinlang dun sa mga nagsasabi na tayo nang naging COVID capital sa buong mundo. Okay, dito naman po makikita nyo yung mga doses na na-administer na. At bagamat mababa pa rin po tayo at under 1 million pa rin tayo, hindi naman po tayo nahuhuli sa ating mga karatig bansa. Sa katunayan, mas mataas pa rin tayo kaysa sa ating mga karatig bansa na Brazil, Taiwan, Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia at Myanmar. Okay. As of April 3, 2021, nasa 795,320 na po ang nabakunahan ng first dose COVID-19 vaccine sa 2,669 vaccination sites sa bansa. Sa bilang na ito, 765,871 ay mga frontline healthcare workers. Nagsimula na rin po ang pagbabakuna sa senior citizens at individuals with comorbidities. Nasa 16,121 mga lolo at lola ang nabakunahan sa NCR at Region 4A, samantalang nasa 13,328 naman po ang nabakunahan sa mga individuals with comorbidity. Sa ilang mga bagay, kinukumpirma ng palasyo na pinirmahan na po ng Presidente ang appointment ni dating Associate Justice Alexander Hesmundo bilang bagong Chief Justice ng Korte Suprema ng Pilipinas. Hindi na po bago si Chief Justice Hesmundo sa hudikatura na kanyang pinagsilbihan ng maraming taon bilang Associate Justice ng Kataas-Taasang Hukuman at bilang Associate Justice po ng Sandigan Bayan. Dahil dito, tiwala kami na ipagpapatuloy ng bagong punong maestrado na i-uphold ang judicial excellence at independence, pairali ng rule of law at pangunahan ang mga reforma para itaguyod ang integridad at profesionalismo sa hudikatura. Congratulations, Chief Justice Hesmundo. Dito po nagtatapos ang ating presentasyon. Makakasama natin po ngayon si Department of Justice Secretary Maynard Guevara. Kung meron po kayong katanungan tungkol dito sa mga water concession agreements na napirmahan, kasama rin din po natin si WHO Country Representative Dr. Rabindra Abayasinge at DOH Sec Rosario Vergere. Secretary Maynard Guevara, do you have an opening statement po? Or would you prefer na puro tanong na lang po? The floor is yours.
Magandang tanghali, Spokesperson. I'm ready to answer questions. You have already summarized the highlights of the revised water concession agreement with Manila Water. So that's about it. I'm ready to answer any further questions regarding the matter.
Thank you, Secretary Guevara. Then we go to WHO Country Representative Dr. Rabindra Abayasinge. Sir, of particular concern is the sudden increase of cases in the Philippines and worldwide. What is the WHO perspective on what is happening to the Philippines and the world and the rest of the world? Is this really evidence of incompetence, as claimed by some? Dr. Rabindra Abayasinge, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Spokesperson Harry Roque. It's a pleasure for me to be back here, and good morning to everybody. Good afternoon. Yes, that's a very important question you are asking. We are seeing week on week increase in the number of cases worldwide, not just here in the Philippines. In nearly all of WHO's 6 regions, we are seeing an increase of cases week by week over the last 4 weeks. And there are 3 factors which are attributed to contributing to this increase, which are thought to be contributing to this increase. If I may name them, the first one is the possible circulation or co-circulation of multiple new variants, which are attributed to have increased transmissibility and in some cases potential for increased severity of disease. These are the so-called variants of concern. The second issue that is attributed to this increase is a gradual reduction in the compliance of the minimum public health standards that were implemented across the world in every country due to the long time frame since the start of the pandemic in January 2020, when many people are showing signs of fatigue with complying with these restrictive practices, which have been proven to be effective in reducing the transmission. And finally, the third attributary factor is the optimism of the arrival and gradual rollout of vaccines, which have led to the reduction of the compliance with the minimum public health standards on the part of citizens, but also to optimism on the part of local governments and authorities where they have relaxed the implementation and monitoring of the minimum public health standards, oftentimes because their attention was focused on preparing for rollout of vaccines. So all of these measures have contributed in varying degrees in different countries to the increase of cases we are seeing. I want to reiterate the fact that the Philippines is not unique in seeing an increase, and this increase is not attributed in any way to a lack or incompetence. It is an issue related to the factors that I mentioned. Of course, that does not take away from the fact that we need to continue to invest and work towards strengthening our preparedness and response capacities on the ground, especially to strengthen our diagnostics, reduce the time required for diagnosis, early contact tracing, quarantining and isolation of infected people or exposed people, ensuring that adequate healthcare capacities are available to manage patients, particularly those patients who develop severe disease because of their advanced age or comorbid conditions. Adequate risk communication to the public about where is the transmission happening, which situations need to be avoided. All of this coming together will ensure that and of course the vaccine rollout, the most important thing, the vaccine rollout, all of this coming together will help us address this surge. So let us continue to work together to ensure that we have a coordinated response. WHO has for many months been talking of the need for a coordinated response, not just a response that is coordinated across member states or countries, but also within countries, between different provincial, regional, district government authorities, so that there is a coordinated response where activities are conducted in a well-coordinated manner so that we can get on top of this increased transmission we are seeing now in the Philippines. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your recent opinion, Dr. Rabindra Abesangi. Now we have DOH Yusek Rosario Vergere. Ma'am, ano ba ho yung pinagbatayan ng IATF para palawigin pa ang ECQ sa Metro Manila Ano yung mga hakbang na gagawin natin para it is not business as usual? At anong inaasahan natin matapos po itong karagdagang linggo ng ECQ? The floor is yours, Yusek Vergere.
Good afternoon, Secretary Harry Roque, and to the other panelists. Magandang hapon po, and good afternoon to all of you. Sec, I have slides. If you will permit, I can present for a short while.
Yes, please, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Can we have the slides, please? So today, we will just be showing ito pong ating situationer at ilang rekomendasyon na nanggaling din po sa Department of Health kasama po ang IATF. Next slide, please. So noong Abril 4, kahapon, meron po tayong sa kabuuang 795,051 cases ng COVID-19 sa buong bansa, kung saan 17.05% po ay aktibong kaso. Mula po sa mga aktibong kaso, 98.8% ay asymptomatic, mild, or moderate, samantalang 1.19% po ang natutukoy na severe or critical COVID-19. Meron po tayong naitalang higit na 646,000 recoveries or 82.27% at ang ating cumulative case fatality rate ay nasa 1.69%. Next slide, please. Kahapon din po nakapagtala tayo ng 11,028 na bagong kaso ng COVID-19. Mula po sa mga bagong kasong ito, 5,586 o higit sa kalahati ay mula sa rehiyon ng National Capital Region. Samantala, ang Rizal at Cavite ay nananatiling nasa top 5 ng mga lugar na may naitalang pinakamaraming bagong kaso ng COVID-19. Next slide, please. Makikita po natin sa slide na ito ang ating epidemic curve na ang peak noong ikatlong linggo ng Marso ay nalagpasan na ang peak noong kalagitnaan ng Marso. Karamihan po sa mga kaso ay mula pa rin sa National Capital Region at sa Region 4A. Bukod po dito, ang bilang po ng mga nagkakasakit nitong huling linggo ng Marso ay malapit na pong umabot sa peak ng bilang ng mga nagkakasakit noong nakaraang linggo. Next slide, please. Noong huling linggo po ng Marso, nakapagtala po tayo ng average ng 8,615 COVID-19 cases kumpara po sa 7,883 COVID-19 cases noong ikatatlong linggo ng Marso. Ito ay higit na mataas sa naitala natin noong buwan ng Enero at Pebrero kung saan may average COVID-19 cases lamang tayo na 1,400. Next slide, please. Ang mga kaso po ay bukod po dito, nakapagtala po tayo ng average na 6,695 COVID-19 cases sa NCR lamang. Ito ay higit na mataas mula sa average na 400 COVID-19 cases noong Enero. Nakakakita po tayo ng pagtaas din ng kaso sa Visayas at Mindanao, datapwat ang pagtaas na ito ay mabagal. Kailangan pong maintindihan ng ating mga kababayan nang huli pong tumaas ang ating mga kaso last July and August of 2020, we saw the decline in the number of cases after 10 days of the ECQ and also saw that our healthcare utilization improved after 2 to 3 weeks of the ECQ. Next slide, please. Makikita po sa slide na ito na meron po tayong downward trend para sa ating mga COVID-19 mortalities. Sa ngayon po, ang ating case fatality rate ay nasa 1.73% at nananatiling mas mababa sa global case fatality rate na 2.2%. Bagamat mababa po ang ating case fatality, binibigyan po namin ng reminder ang ating mga kababayan na magpatingin agad kung kayo ay may simptomas, mag-self-isolate at tumawag po kayo sa inyong Barangay Health Emergency Response Teams para mai-transfer po kayo sa appropriate facility. Next slide, please. Para naman po sa bilang ng mga namatay mula sa COVID-19, nakapagtala po ang Department of Health ng 563 COVID-19 deaths o average of 18 deaths kada araw noong buwan ng Marso. Patuloy naman po nating minomonitor ang Region 7, NCR, CAR, 4A at Region 11 para sa mga namamatay. Next slide. Para naman po sa ICU bed utilization ng National Capital Region, meron po tayong 7 NCR areas na nasa critical risk ang paggamit ng ICU, samantalang 6 naman po sa NCR plus areas ang nasa high risk. Dahil dito, pinapaalalahanan po natin uli ang ating mga kababayan na pumunta po tayo sa ating mga Barangay Health Emergency Response Teams. Tawagan po sila para po alam natin kung sa ospital po ba tayo talaga pupunta o meron pong mga quarantine facilities para kayo ay ma-accommodate. Next slide, please. Ang tuloy-tuloy at mabilis na pagtaas ng kaso ay dulot po ng 3 factors katulad ng sinabi ni Dr. Rabi ng WHO. Una, ang transmission rate na bumilis ng 6 hanggang 9 na beses dulot sa pagdami ng mga variants of concerns na mas nakakahawa at mababang compliance sa mga protocols ng pangkalusugan. Ikalawa, ang increased mobility at pagkukumpul-kumpul ng mga tao, lalong-lalo na sa mga lugar na walang maayos na daloy ng hangin. At ikatlo, ang paghaba ng panahon ng isang infected individual ay nananatiling nakakahawa. Humahaba ang panahon na ito habang ang taong may sakit ay hindi pa po nahahanap at na-isolate. At dahil sa patuloy na pagtaas ng kaso ng COVID-19 at pagkapuno ng ating mga ospital dito sa NCR, napagdesisyonan po ng IATF na ituloy ng isa pang linggo ang ating enhanced community quarantine. Ang ECQ po ay naglalayo na pabagalin ang pagtaas ng bilang ng mga kaso, pigilan ang pagkalat ng mga variants at bigyan ng oras ang ating health system na makahinga at maisaayos ang pagpapatupad ng response strategies at protocols at protektahan pa ho natin ang mas maraming buhay. Next slide, please. Base po sa dami ng COVID-19, pati na rin po ang kasalukuyang estado ng ating healthcare utilization rate, nirekomenda po ng Department of Health na ituloy ang enhanced community quarantine ng 1 linggo. Ang extension po na ito ay naglalayong i-monitor ang progress natin para sa PDITR strategy. Maari lamang po tayo makapag-shift sa mas mababang quarantine classification katulad ng MECQ kung makikita na po nating mas umaayos na po ang ating health system at meron na po tayong agarang detection at isolation. Ito po ay pangungunahan ng DILG para sa ating mga local governments, DOLE at BPI para sa mga workplaces at yung atin pong TGMROF or the task group concerning the overseas Filipinos para naman po sa ating mga returning overseas Filipinos. Tutukuyin din po natin ang maximum carrying capacity ng National Capital Region plus para sa percentage na pwedeng mag-work from home para mabawasan po ang mobility dito po sa NCR plus bubble. Next slide. In the interim, kailangan din po nating agad-agad na ma-decongest ang ating mga ospital para po makahinga ang ating health system at maprotektahan pa natin ang ating healthcare workers. At ito pong mga sumusunod na nasa slide na ito ay napag-usapan natin kanina with HPAC, with the One Hospital Command, with DILG and the MMDA. So ito po yung ma-maximize po natin yung mga lower level hospitals para magamit for step-down care facility. Mailipat po natin ang mga pasyenteng mild and asymptomatic from the tertiary hospitals to these lower level facilities or to quarantine facilities. Kailangan po ng enabling of patient transport para po ang ating mga kababayan ay agad-agad na nabibigyang tugon sa kanilang mga pangangailangan pangkalusugan. Kailangan po natin i-mainstream ang telemedicine. Marami po sa ating mga kababayan ay nawawalan po ng guidance, no? Kaya tumutuloy na sila sa mga ospital. We need to ensure that telemedicine is there para matatawagan at mabigyan po sila ng direksyon kung ano ang dapat nilang gawin. Meron po tayong siniset up na LGU triage system. Ito po ay para putulin itong pagta-traffic sa ospital at sa One Hospital Command. We will have this LGU triage system kung saan ang local government health officials po ay magsiset up ng incident command with this triage system para sila po ang nagta-traffic kung saan pupunta ang pasyente, kung sa quarantine facility ba o kailangan ng dalhin sa ospital. This will be enabled also with multiple logistical requirements where they will be navigating patients. May mga ambulansya po tayong available para po makumpleto ang ating sistema. Ito po ay nakalink sa One Hospital Command at patuloy na rin nakalink sa ating mga ospital. And ito pong pagpapataas ng mga numero ng ating mga kama, katulad po ng nasabi na rin kanina ni Secretary Harry Roque. Next slide, please. So ano na po ba ang nagawa natin para ma-augment natin ang ating mga ospital following the increased occupancy rate here in the NCR plus in the other areas of the country? So Amin pong fina-fast track ang pagsiset up ng mga modular tents sa mga ospital across Metro Manila. Meron na po tayong 8 ospital na mabibigyan na ng mga tents na modular para sa kanilang extension for their facility. WHO also has committed to provide 4 tents to be used as LGU-based triage areas. Ang DPWH po has facilitated the creation of extensions for level 3 hospitals. Ito na po yung mga nasabi na rin kanina ni Secretary Harry Roque. Meron po tayong 42 healthcare workers from the other regions na merong mababang kaso ng COVID-19 na i-deploy na po ngayong linggo dito po sa iba't ibang ospital natin. Ang atin po mga uniformed personnel medical reservists had been tapped already para iman nila ang ating temporary treatment and monitoring facilities. Meron na rin po tayong na-identify na mga hotel facilities para po mailagak natin ang ating mga healthcare workers na mga nagkakasakit. And of course, yung pagproseso po natin ng mga benepisyo ng ating healthcare workers ay tuloy-tuloy pa rin. Next slide. Ito na po ang aking huling slide. Muli po, inaanyayahan po natin ang ating mga kababayan. Manatili po tayo sa bahay at lumabas lamang kung kinakailangan. Tumawag po kayo agad sa inyong barangay health emergency response teams kung meron po kayo nararamdamang simptomas ng COVID-19 o kumonsulta po agad kayo dito sa telemedicine hotlines natin. I-isolate din ang sarili agad upang hindi na makapanghawa ng iba. Nais po namin bigyang diin sa panahong ito, kinakailangan po lahat po tayo ay magtulong-tulong. Dapat alam natin ang tamang informasyon at alam natin ang dapat nating gawin para po tayo ay maprotektahan. Yun lamang po, Secretary Harry. Thank you very much po.
Maraming salamat, DOH Undersecretary Rosario Vergere. Punta na po tayo sa ating open forum. Yusek Roque, simulan na po natin. Yusek Roque. Okay, habang inaantay natin si Yusek Roque. Yusek Roque, wala kang audio?
Yes, Naka-ano naman po ako. Okay na po?
Okay, go ahead please.
Hello?
Go ahead na.
Yes, okay na?
Okay.
Opo. Secretary, unahin lang daw po muna yung tanong for Secretary Guevara, if I may po muna. Secretary Guevara, tanong po ni Sam Medanilla ng Business Mirror. Last week daw po na-announce po ng DOJ na nakapag-sign na po ang Manila Water at ang government ng new concession deal. Will the government still file cases against the said company for its alleged onerous 1997 contract with the government?
Thank you, Yusek Roque. Sam, doon sa new concession agreement ay merong provision doon about yung waiver ng mga claims. No? At the same time, when this revised concession agreement was executed, meron din kasabay na deed of settlement yan, no? And release na pinirmahan din by both sides. But this release pertains only to the claims arising from the contract itself, no? Like for example, yung mga inaward ng Singapore Arbitration Tribunal ay wini-waive na, no? And any other claims arising from the old concession agreement. But if you are referring some to, for example, criminal liability, that is a totally different matter, and that needs further studies, no? And besides, somebody's got to put up the complaint before the Department of Justice or before the Office of the Ombudsman. Right now, we have not heard of any party who has filed or is attempting or thinking of filing something like that with the Office of the Ombudsman or with the Department of Justice.
Opo, Secretary, tanong po mula kay Sanarina Monte ng Manila Shimbun. Secretary Guevara, what are the main features daw po of the new concession agreement with Manila Water? Are they no longer, same question po ni Sam Medanilla. And when do you intend to sign new concession agreement with Manila? Will the provisions be likely the same with that of Manila Water?
Yusek Roque, Secretary, I think the question has been answered in the presentation itself, no, para we can save time, no. Pero yung next question is, when will the revised concession agreement be signed with Manila daw po?
Okay, the other concession agreement, no, with Manila, the negotiations with respect to that will start immediately. And we will be proposing essentially the same terms and conditions as those that were contained in the revised agreement with Manila Water. But of course, we recognize the fact na differently situated ang Maynilad compared to Manila Water. So there will be probably a lot of discussions also with respect to possible modification of the terms and conditions.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
Secretary, yung pong third question ni Salarina na sagot niyo na rin po, yung follow-up po niya, but will the government initiate its own complaint against the water companies?
Nawala po kayo, Secretary Guevara. Nawala po ang volume. Sec Guevara, nawala ang audio.
I have already answered that question.
Already answered that question. Sec Guevara has answered the question. Okay, next question, please.
Question from...
Nawala ka rin ng volume, Yusek. Pati ikaw nawala ang volume.
Okay na po, Secretary?
Well, nawala ang volume mo, no? Mahina.
Secretary, okay.
Ayan, okay na. Go.
Okay na. Secretary, tanong mula kay Belia Carriazo ng Daily Tribune. President Duterte daw po ordered FDA and Department of Health to authorize use of ivermectin. Is this true and confirmed?
Hindi po, no? Ang nangyari is nag-meeting po nung Sabado ang IATF for almost 10 hours. And one of the agenda na na-discuss po yung ivermectin, no? At rineport po ni Yusek Domingo, yung Director General ng ating FDA, na meron na po nag-apply ngayon, no, for compassionate use ng ivermectin. So, pwede na pong i-process yan ng FDA, hindi gaya dati na wala pong nag-a-apply. So, antayin na lang po natin ang aksyon ng FDA sa mga naisampa ng aplikasyon for ivermectin.
Opo, yung tanong mula kay Rosalie Cos ng UNTV, ano daw po ang posisyon ng Malacanang sa issue ngayon ng Chinese militia vessels sa West Philippine Sea? Suportado ba ninyo ang pahayag ni DND Secretary Delphine Lorenzana na nagsabing dapat lumaya sa China, ang China sa teritoryo natin, at ano rin ang komento ninyo sa pahayag ng Chinese Embassy?
Hindi po nagbabago ang posisyon ng ating presidente. Ito po yung kanyang nabanggit na salita sa UN General Assembly. Unang-una po, hindi po natin isasakripisyo, hindi natin pamimigay ang ating national territory at ang ating mga exclusive economic zone. Pangalawa po, naniniwala tayo at pinanindigan natin ang arbitral decision na pabor sa atin. Pangatlo, ireresolba po natin ang hidwaang ito sa pamamagitan po ng mapayapang mga pamamaraan sang-ayon po sa UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Ang posisyon po ng Presidente, paninindigan natin ang karapatan pero hindi po ito isang bagay para tayo po ay gumamit ng dahas. Kampante po ang ating Presidente na dahil nga po meron tayong malapit na pagkakaibigan, mariresolba itong hidwaan na ito.
Opo, ang second question niya, sinasabi ng PhilHealth na kulang ang kanilang mga tao kaya hindi agad na proseso ang claims na dapat bayaran sa mga ospital. Ayon naman sa Private Hospital Association of the Philippines, napipilitan na sila magbawas ng manpower dahil nga kulang na rin sila sa pondo dahil hindi pa bayad ang ibang claim. So ano daw po ang gagawin ng pamahalaan para resolbahin ang suliraning ito?
Matapos po ang 10 oras na pagmi-meeting ng IATF ng Sabado, nag-meeting pa po kami, 3 oras, kasama po si Executive Secretary at si Senator Bongo. At isa sa mga pinag-meetingan natin ay yung sa PhilHealth at nangako naman po si Director Giran na bibilisan niya yung proseso. Kasi meron nga po nagsasabi na dapat tanggapin yung proposal ng DBP na magbi-bills purchase, no? Or babayaran ng DBP ang mga pagkakautang ng PhilHealth tapos kukuha ng reimbursement sa PhilHealth. Ang naging posisyon po ni Dr. Giran, kung kumpleto naman ang papeles, bakit kinakailangan pang umutang sa DBP? So pinagbibigyan po natin ng PhilHealth sa gusto nilang mangyari, pero malinaw po ang sinabi lalo-lalo ni Executive Secretary Medialdea. Sa panahon ng pandemya, kinakailangan bilisan ang pagbabayad sa mga pribadong hospital dahil 70% pa rin ng ating healthcare capacity ay nasa kamay ng mga pribadong hospital at kung walang pondo ang mga pribadong hospital, wala rin silang kakayahan na gamutin ang mga nagkakasakit. At tinanggap naman po yung mensahe na yan ni Atty. Giran.
Thank you, Secretary Roque.
Okay, punta naman tayo kay Mela Lesmoras, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Secretary Roque. For my first question about sa ECQ lang po, nabanggit nyo kasi sir sa inyong pahayag na for at least another week itong ECQ extension. Gaano po kaya kalaki yung chance na ma-extend pa ito? Ano po yung mga deciding factors natin?
Well, gaya ng sinabi ni Yusek Vergere, no, pwede lang tayo mag-shift sa lower na MECQ pag nakita natin na nagkakaroon ng bunga o resulta yung ating pinainting na PDITR. No? Yusek Vergere, would you like to add?
Yes, sir. Yun pong ating mga measures na ginagamit para makapag-de-escalate tayo ay ito po yung mga numerong atin pong nakikita araw-araw as reported cases. Plus, tinitignan din po natin syempre yung ating healthcare utilization. So, nung nag-decision po para i-extend ang ECQ, ang mga naging basihan po natin would be the healthcare utilization primarily dahil nakikita natin talagang nahihirapan ngayon ang ating sistema. Pag tayo ay nagkaroon uli ng assessment for this week, titignan po natin ang healthcare utilization, ang numero ng mga kaso, pati na rin po yun pong ating PDITR strategies na pinapatupad natin lalong-lalo na sa mga local government units.
Opo. Thank you po, Yusek Vergere and Secretary Roque. Secretary Roque, doon naman po sa EQ8, gaano katagal po ba ang utos ng Malacanang sa ating mga LGUs para sa distribution nito? At ano pong order ni Pangulong Duterte nga hinggil dito sa ating mga mamamahagi ng ayuda?
Sa lalong mabilis sa panahon po. Ito po yung dahilan kung bakit nabago po yung pinirmahan ni Presidente. Dati-rati in kind, ngayon po silent kung in cash or in kind kasi nga ang gusto mangyari ng Presidente sa lalong mabilis sa panahon. Sana po itong linggo ito ay mapamahagi na yung ayuda na yan dahil ito po ay pangalawang linggo na ng ECQ.
Okay, and for my last question lang, Secretary Roque, may talk to the people po ba later si Pangulong Duterte? Ano po kaya yung schedule na this week? Meron po kayong mga bagong vaccine supply na sasalubungin si Pangulong Duterte?
Wala pong talk to the people mamayang gabi. Possible po sa Wednesday. At sinabi po ni Presidente na yung huling pagdating ng Sinovac, baka yun na rin po yung huli niyang pagsalubong sa mga bakuna, bagamat inaasahan natin na sunod-sunod na po ang pagdating ng mga bakuna.
Okay, thank you po, Secretary Roque at sa ating mga...
Maraming salamat, Mela. Punta tayo uli kay Yusek Roque, please.
Yes, Secretary, tanong ni Red Mendoza ng Manila Times. Sabi po niya, na-interview daw po niya ang 2 patients sa parehong namatay na naghihintay sa ICU bed. Sa parking lot na ospital, isang COVID at isang non-COVID. Itong mga sitwasyon daw po ang patunay na may problema ang ospital at nagmamakaawa na sila na ayusin. Ano daw po ang reaksyon ng palasyo dito?
Yusek Vergere, ang sinabi nga po ni Yusek Vergere kanina, no, talagang dinadagdagan natin yung mga hospital bed capacity natin. Bukas nga po yung 110 bed capacity sa Quezon Institute, no, among others. But Yusek Vergere?
Opo sir, ito po ay naipakita natin kanina kung ano mga ginagawa ng ating pamahalaan para ma-decongest natin ang mga ospital. Katulad ng sabi po namin, nakapag-meeting tayo kaninang umaga, alas 11, with HPAC, with DILG, with MMDA, and the One Hospital Command. At atin pong ipapatupad itong mga pinakita nating interim measures, the immediate measures, ngayon pong araw na to hanggang ngayong linggo para ma-decongest natin ang ating mga ospital.
Yung second question niya, Secretary, nasagot na po. Tanong po niya kay Dr. Abenyasing from Red Mendoza, is it fair to compare the Philippines as having the most number of active cases in the Western Pacific region? And what does it say on the country's COVID response?
Thank you, Secretary. I think I already addressed that question partially. The fact that a country reports a large number of cases is dependent on many factors. In the first place, it's determined by the population size, the testing capacity, the health system's capacity. So we know that there are significant differences among these between countries. So what would be more accurate is to look at the incidence rate or the number of cases per 100,000 or 1 million population. This would point to where the Philippines actually is. But again, there are multiple factors that affect the transmission in a country because countries are different from each other. And so we have to take into mind all of these factors when we are assessing how severe is the outbreak in a country. Right now, with the confirmation of 3 variants of concern in the Philippines, plus a variant of interest in the P3 variant, which was first detected in Philippines and Japan, the situation is being fueled probably to some extent by the widespread presence of these variants. So we have to look at it in this context, and that's what I was pointing to early on when I said that the increase we are seeing in the Philippines in the recent 2 weeks is not uniquely only relevant to the Philippines. We are seeing that kind of increase in many countries, and I'd also like to highlight that we are even seeing this increasing trend even in countries that have been doing extensive vaccination. So this is something that we need to bear in mind, and if I may use this opportunity, this is another opportunity that we need to reinforce that whether it's variants of concern or variants of interest, we know that the minimum public health standards, when implemented fully and adequately, are adequate to interrupt transmission. So let us ensure that our focus is on that so that we are not distracted by other issues and ensure that we have a coordinated response to facilitate the full implementation of the PDITR strategy to limit the transmission and to take care of those people who require specialized care because of the onset of severe disease. Thank you.
Dadagdagon ko lang po, no? Naka-flash ngayon po sa ating screen yung Philippine World Ranking sang-ayon po sa Johns Hopkins University. No? Sa total cases, nananatili po tayong nasa number 30. Bakit po tayo nanatili bagamat sumipa ang mga numero ng kaso sa Pilipinas? Kasi nga po, sa iba't ibang parte ng daigdig, sumipa rin ang mga numero. Sa active cases, from 21, naging 19 po tayo. Sa cases per 1 million, nananatili po tayong 134th in the world. At sa case fatality, talagang napababa po natin yan. Nasa number 94 po tayo from 82. So yan po ang ating standing sa international community. Gaya ng sinabi po ni Dr. Rabi, sa buong daigdig po, tumataas ang numero dahil sa mga variants nito.
Opo. A question from Red Mendoza pa rin for Dr. Rabi. Dr. Rabi, questions again from Red Mendoza. Proponents of the anti-parasitic drug ivermectin has continually badgered the DOH, FDA, and even WHO for not considering the effects of the drug, considering the lack of clinical trial data, using their influence on media to demonize science. Does it mean the citizens are now desperate to look for a cure and they resort to bullying science and use unproven claims as basis? How does the WHO intensify its efforts to curb disinformation like this?
Thank you, Yusek Roque. If I start by saying that probably the fight against the infodemic has been even more difficult than the fight against the pandemic. There have been situations where this kind of misinformation has been driving and impacting on the capacity of national governments to respond to the pandemic because they are seriously distracting technical people from doing what they need to do. We very clearly have come out with a statement that has been backed by the European Medical Association, the US FDA, in fact, the manufacturer, the largest manufacturer of ivermectin, that ivermectin has not a proven efficacy for COVID-19, against COVID-19. Even if we look at it from a preventive perspective, there is no evidence that supports it. That is why WHO came out with a very clear position that the potential use of ivermectin as a prophylactic or as a therapeutic agent needs to be evaluated through adequately strong clinical trials, such as the solidarity trials. Previously, we had a similar situation with hydroxychloroquine. We looked at several antiviral drugs, And when you do trials to scale, you see that there is no significant impact. Let us remember that COVID-19, many patients recover because it's a viral disease without any specific treatment, provided they have good immune systems. The vast majority, more than 95% of them, recover without specific treatments. So if you give those people a particular drug and say that that drug cured them, that's not science, that's not evidence. And this is what is happening again with possibly ivermectin. We are not clear on that. That's why WHO says, let's do a clinical trial that has the power to differentiate whether what you have seen is because of chance or whether it's the actual efficacy of the drug. When we have that evidence, we will be ready to share it. In the meantime, let's focus on what we know works and not create undue confidence in the people that because they take A or B, they are going to be protected. We've seen that repeatedly. People who've taken, for example, hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin falling ill to COVID. So let's refrain from this and let the scientists do what they have to do.
Thank you, Dr. Rabi. Secretary Roque.
Yes, punta tayo kay Trish Terada of CNN Philippines, please.
Hi, good afternoon, folks, and to all our guests. Sir, first question, I'll just press on the parameters for easing or de-escalating to to lockdowns, no? So, yung first, sir, ano po yung specific parameters or indicators that will prompt the IATF to place NCR plus from ECQ to MECQ? For example, sir, specifics like how many number of beds do we need? How many number of cases will prompt the IATF to lower the level of quarantine status?
Kapag umabot po sa critical yung ating healthcare utilization rate, isa po yung dahilan para sa escalation. At tinitingnan din po natin yung attack, no? Kung yung daily attack rate at saka yung 2-week average attack rate, kapag yan po ay umabot din sa critical, ay o kaya sa critical ay isa rin po yung dahilan para ma-escalate ang ating quarantine classification. So hindi po tayo nagbabago ng criteria. At pinakita po ni Yusek Vergere na kaparehong critical care capacity natin at saka yung ating attack rates ay nasa critical. Kaya po nasa ECQ tayo.
So kapag bumaba po tayo, sir, lower than the critical level, pwede po mag-ease ng restrictions. And ano po, sir, yung target numbers natin? For example, average of what number per day yung tinitignan natin to lower the status?
Yusek Vergere? Ano po daw yung ating target with the 2-week ECQ, which probably will be coupled by MECQ or GCQ at the 3rd week, no, after the 2-week ECQ?
Yes, sir. For healthcare utilization, we need to see that the utilization will be down to at least 60% before we can say that we are at that safe level. So currently, for the overall utilization here in NCR, we have about 78 to 80% utilization. And for ICU beds, as I have shown you a while ago, almost 100% in most cities. So we need to bring that down so that we will be able to say that our healthcare system can manage. Aside from that, we have our local government or code indicators. These are the PDITR indicators. So we have set targets per week wherein we need to see all contacts traced within 24 hours and they are isolated within 24 hours. Also looking at the percentage of those mild and asymptomatic being treated in quarantine facilities and only those moderate to severe cases in hospitals. So this is just a composition of many indicators for these PDITR strategies. But what would be most important really would be for us to look at the healthcare utilization. The health system should be able to manage and should be able to breathe and should have this decongestion before we can say that we can easily lift the restrictions for this community quarantine.
All right. Thank you, Yusek Vergere. Spokes, I'll just go about the topic on ayuda or government aid. Tama po yung pagkaintindi namin, no? It's yung binigay kamakailan is a one-time aid to poor families or to poor individuals. But how did the government decide on giving 1,000 pesos? Do you think it would be enough to sustain these people for 2 weeks since na-extend po tayo sa ECQ? Or is the government considering another round of aid?
Ka-clarify ko lang po, this is 1,000 per person or up to 4,000 per family, no? So up to 4 po yan. So kasi pag sinabi natin 1,000, parang 1,000 lang talaga for 2 weeks. Pangalawa po, sinabay po natin yung unang linggo ng ECQ sa Semana Santa na talaga namang 2 araw lang po nagtatrabaho yung ating mga kababayan. Kasi Wednesday po, Thursday, Friday, wala na pong trabaho yan, no? So 2 araw lang po yun na walang kita nila at ngayon po mawawala ng 5 araw na kita. Aaminin po natin na hindi po sapat yan. Pero ang ayuda naman po, kaya tinatawag na ayuda, it is assistance, hindi po talaga sapat, no? It is intended to tide them over, no? At ang sabi nga po ni Secretary Avisado, gustuhin man natin magbigay pa ng mas marami, this is a one-time aid of 4,000 for a family of 4, no? So, yun po. It is an ayuda. We acknowledge na hindi po sapat ito, pero it is to provide for the bare essentials of life for 2 weeks na ang number of days na nawalan ng trabaho ang ating mga kababayan is about 7 days.
Sir, next question. We understand that the cases have been increasing in different parts of the world, and it's not the government's fault that the virus is mutating. But with the situation that we are in now, of course, it's specific to our country, no? What does the President think about how everything is being handled? Did the President ever reach a point na he would consider changing leaderships? Baka hindi ba, sir, nakita ng Presidente na posibleng may lapses in leadership kung bakit po tayo umabot sa ganito?
I believe it was Dr. Ted Herbosa, a specialist on emergency medicine, who said that it is contrary to the basics of emergency medicine to change leadership in the middle of a pandemic, no? So I don't think we will achieve anything by that. And in fairness to those who are leading this initiative, we have employed what is known as a one government approach. Hindi lang naman po WHO ito. Alam ko rin po ang tanong nyo, si Dr. Duque ang tanong ninyo, no? Hindi lang naman po si Dr. Duque involved dito. Lahat po ng mga magagaling na mga doktor at mga scientists sa DOH, sa DOST at ibang sangay ng gobyerno ay involved po sa ating COVID response. Hindi lang po isang tao nagdedesisyon dito, no? Yan po ang dahilan kung bakit tinayo natin ang IATF. Pero the brief answer is, hindi na po pwede yan dahil yan po ay magiging labag doon sa basic principle na kapag may pandemya, ibigay mo ng kinakailangan at huwag mo nang pag-isapan yung liderato na yan.
Sir, one last very short na. Kasi sir, yung J&J, I think already applied for a permit here in the Philippines. I understand kapag nangyayari po yung mga application, meron na rin pong talks kung kailan yung target na darating. I believe they are targeting 5 million vaccines for the Philippines. Napag-usapan na po ba na-discuss kung kailan target na dumating po yung J&J, at least the initial delivery?
Well, alam ko po merong target delivery yan, no? Hindi ko lang po maalala, but I'm referring to the earlier report of Secretary Galvez, and I'm looking at his last report to the President. Ang J&J po, at least from his last report to the President, is scheduled to arrive by the 3rd quarter, specifically in the month of July. Baka po ito magbabago at malalaman po natin ito sa susunod na report ni Secretary Galvez kay Presidente.
Alright, Spoke. Salamat po, and salamat po sa ating guest.
Maraming salamat po. Balik tayo kay Yusek Roque.
Yes, Secretary, unahin ko na po yung tanong ni Vance Fernandez for Secretary Guevara. How will the revised concession deals with Manila Water bring about better water utility services to the Filipino people, and how will this help in the prevention of future water shortage?
Well, some of the highlights of the new revised concession agreement with Manila Water have been introduced earlier by Spokesperson. But I'd like to just repeat some of the more important ones. Definitely the revised water concession agreement will be beneficial to the consumers because it is now, this concession is now deemed as a public utility. And therefore, all the things that are associated with an enterprise being considered a public utility will now be applied to this water concession agreement. One very important feature of the revised agreement is on the matter of corporate income tax, no? Which used to be part of the expenditures being passed on by the concessionaire to the consuming public. Now, definitely hindi na siya kasama na ma-charge. And as already mentioned earlier, wala tayong magiging increase in water rates or tariffs until December 31 of 2022 out of consideration for the existing situation natin. No? So ang next na possible adjustments sa ating water rates will happen only in 2023. Merong mga factors na na-mention earlier si Spokesperson Harry, like sa pag-adjust ng water rates na ibabase halimbawa sa Consumer Price Index, inflation rate, hindi na yung kabuuan ng CPI ang magiging basihan, but only 2/3 of that. Pati yung foreign currency adjustments ay wala na rin, hindi na rin yan i-consider. Kaya kung may foreign loans ang water concessionaire na binabayaran nila sa foreign exchange at nagkaroon ng pagtaas ng foreign exchange rate na mahal ang US dollar, for example, yung ganong klaseng increase or adjustment in the foreign exchange rate will not be considered anymore in determining the water charges to be billed sa ating mga consumers. No? Sa government side ay malaki ang naging pagbabago at ang pinakamahalaga dito ay yung pagtanggal sa napaka-onerous na non-interference clause na hindi pwedeng pakialaman ng national leadership, ng national government, ang anumang mapagkakasunduan ng regulatory office at ng water concessionaire regarding water rates. Nangyari na ito before at tayo ay nademanda by both Manila Water and Maynilad at tayo ay nagkaroon tayo ng damages. We were asked to pay damages amounting to almost 11 billion pesos for the two water concessionaires. But of course, in the case of Manila Water, and I think also in the case of Maynilad, they already waived yung award that was given to them by the arbitration court. No? But here in the revised agreement, wala na yung ganyang possible penalties or prohibition on the national government from interfering. So kung tingin ng national government ay hindi makabubuti mga consumers, ang let's say ang water rates na ini-impose ng water concessionaire, hindi makatarungan, hindi fair, hindi equitable, then the national government may enter the picture, may put its foot down and intervene if necessary without fear of getting penalized or getting sued for such intervention. So yun ang mga mahalaga na mga provisions ng ating bagong concession agreement with Manila Water.
Thank you, Secretary Guevara. Secretary Roque, question from Chris Jose Apremate. Nabanggit niyo na po ito tungkol dun sa inaasahang pagdating pa ng mga vaccine. Ang susunod pong tanong mula kay Ace Romero, bakit po nabanggit ng Pangulo na huling pagsalubong na niya sa arriving vaccines yung sa Sinovac?
Well, ang inaasahan naman niya ay sunod-sunod na yung pagdating. No? So it will just be, kumbaga, matter of course na marami ng bakunang darating, no? As supplies ease up worldwide. No? So yun lang po yun. Hindi na siya physically na pupunta sa airport para salubungin yung mga bakuna.
Opo, question from Tina Panganiban Perez ng GMA News. Marami daw po nalilito sa category sa vaccination. Baka pwede daw po malinawan sino-sino ang nasa A4. Ano ba ang binabanggit sa A4 na essential sector? Iniisip na iba kasama ang nasa food business. Tama po ba daw yun?
Well, isa sa pinal pa po yan. No? At may mga rekomendasyon na kasama ang food business dyan. In fact, marami mga rekomendasyon. Ako po, naninindigan ako na dapat makasama yung mga kasama natin mga mamamahayag sa A4. Pero wala pa pong pinal na decision dyan sa A4 kasi wala pa po tayo sa A4. Nasa A1, A2 at A3 lang po tayo. Pero ang basic category ng A4, yung mga sundalo at kapulisan, yung mga nagtatrabaho sa mga ECQ industries, yung bukas sa mga ECQ. At tama po kayo, no? Pinag-uusapan yung mga nasa transportasyon, nasa mga nagbebenta sa palengke, dahil yan naman po ay bukas kapag ECQ, yung mga food retail, mga frontline government workers, security guards, delivery services, pero wala pa pong pinal na decisions. Hayaan nyo po, as soon as masa pinal yan, anunsyo naman po natin. At kapag magsisimula na yung A4.
Okay, from Rosalie Cos ng UNTV, hindi ba daw po iaapila ng Malacanang ang pagkasama ng Pilipinas sa UK Red List?
Ang paningin po natin is matagal na rin naman natin hindi pinapapasok yung mga galing din sa UK at ito naman po ay panandaliang measure, no. So gaya ng hindi natin pagpasok sa mga pasahero galing sa UK, hindi naman po tayo pinagbabawal. Ang ibig sabihin lang nung latest restriction ng UK, kinakailangan mag-hotel quarantine po yung mga Pilipino na pupunta po sa UK. Yun po yung aking pagkakaintindi. So kung ano po yung ginagawa natin sa mga dayuhan, yun din po ang rini-require ngayon ng UK. Dati-rati kasi pasok lang ng pasok lahat ng bisita sa UK.
Okay, thank you, Secretary.
Maraming salamat po. Melo Acuña, please.
Good afternoon and happy Easter, Secretary
Happy
Harry.
Easter. Happy Easter.
During my interview last Good Friday with the President of the Federation of Filipino-Chinese Chambers of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Henry Lim Bonlong, he said that the tripartite agreement will be signed probably by Easter Sunday. Would you know if the tripartite agreement has been signed yesterday?
Hindi ko pa po alam, no? Pero ang alam ko naman kung hindi Easter Sunday, it will be today. Pero siguro naman it's too much to ask Secretary Galvez to work on a Sunday dahil on a Saturday, we all work po for 14 hours on Black Saturday. So, siguro naman pwedeng mamahinga on Easter Sunday.
Yeah. Okay, and let's leave it at that. I have a question for Dr. Ravindra Abiyasinghe, with your indulgence, Secretary Harry.
Yes, please.
Dr. Ravindra Abiyasinghe, you mentioned 3 factors why there's the upsurge in COVID-19 cases, and one of this is the slow rollout of vaccines. But I was informed that there are only 2.5 million doses of vaccines and about 900,000 have been vaccinated. So without the vaccines, there is nothing we can roll out. What would WHO say about such a situation?
Thank you, Mela, for the question. Really nice to see you again. The question, the point that I mentioned was not the slow rollout of vaccines. What I mentioned as a contributory factor was the optimism driven by the arrival of vaccines. But since you're raising the issue of rollout of vaccines, I want to also touch on this because this is an important component of the response, the vaccine rollout. The problem is that we as a global community are faced with a vaccine shortage. And that vaccine shortage has also been driven by the recent increase in cases. So for example, the Serum Institute of India, which was exporting large quantities of vaccines to COVAX, based on a decision by the Indian government to protect the Indian population because of the surge of cases, has decided that they will not be exporting vaccines till the end of this month. It's for all Indian vaccine manufacturers. We are also seeing similar restrictions being placed by other developed countries and groups of countries. So when that happens, accessing vaccines that meet the requirements from safety and efficacy becomes a challenge. WHO is working together with many of the manufacturers to see how we can address that. We are exploring several avenues, but what has happened actually is that even the planned deliveries are being delayed and scaled down because of an immediate shortage that the globe is facing. And you must have heard my Director General repeatedly saying that many countries are in a rush to vaccinate all of their population when we are trying to have a more equitable distribution where we provide protection to the most vulnerable and the most at-risk groups. And this is why WHO has been urging countries that have excess doses at present to share those, because we believe that within the third quarter and fourth quarter of this year, significant increases in manufacturing capacity will happen. And newer vaccines will also be included even in the COVAX portfolio. So as these vaccines become available, we are optimistic that we can still deliver on the vaccines required to protect the 20% of the population that is most vulnerable through the COVAX. but these same restrictions also apply to bilateral agreements that countries have signed with manufacturers. Simply put, there is a challenge in accessing vaccines. So we are working continuously with the National Task Force and the DOH to maximize the impact of the currently available vaccines by prioritizing the healthcare workers in areas where we are seeing a surge, by prioritizing the elderly and the comorbid where we are seeing a surge, but we are also conscious of the fact that we need to protect all the healthcare workers because this virus is spreading all over. And if we are looking at redeploying health workers from areas with low transmission, we need to ensure that all health workers, all frontliners are vaccinated so that they can care for patients. Because if the healthcare workers are protected, we not only minimize infection among healthcare workers, we have adequate staff to care for the people who are sick, and that way we reduce the deaths even among the severe cases. So the vaccines are a powerful tool, and we need to optimize their use so that we maximize their impact. This is a responsibility that we all share as humanity.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ravindra Abeyasinghe. For Undersecretary Vergeire, please. Good afternoon and happy Easter, Dr. Vergeire. I just have two important points. There are reports that there are hospital workers who tested positive and under quarantine today. So how do we complement people who are under quarantine? Who would replace them? And then number two, while we have enough capacity, bed capacity, ICU capacity for COVID-19 positive cases, do we have enough oxygen so far?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Melo, and happy Easter also to you. First, when it comes to the healthcare workers, our hospitals have their contingency plans when this kind of events happen. So whenever this kind of situations happen in our hospitals, they do their strategic shift of workers where they would be extending some of them doing hospital work, and then some of the units are being closed. Like, for example, that of the Philippine Orthopedic Center. Temporarily, they have closed their outpatient department and have temporarily suspended elective surgeries. This is because some of their healthcare workers has been infected and they have to undergo this 14-day period to recover. So whenever this thing happens to our hospitals, they do their re-strategizing so that their healthcare workers can fully accommodate those individuals or patients that are being managed in their hospital. Augmentation will come in, but they have to do their contingency plans also within their hospitals. So the second one would be, Mr. Melo, was the second question? I'm sorry.
Oxygen supply in the country.
Yes, we have still not received any report of having this shortage of oxygen supply among our hospitals here in the National Capital Region. Although we are, of course, preparing if this will happen. So we have engaged already and coordinated with the units in government, especially in DOH, that should be able to ensure that the oxygen supply in the country will be enough for our individuals who have COVID-19.
Thank you very much for the assurance, Undersecretary. For Secretary Guevara, sir, good afternoon and happy Easter. I just want to be updated on the latest activities of the Department of Justice investigating the alleged extrajudicial killings that took place recently, including the Bloody Sunday in Region 4A. Have you received updates from your personnel?
Thank you, Melo. Well, we have already created, first of all, Melo, we have already placed these incidents under the jurisdiction of the AO 35 Interagency Committee, the one dealing with extrajudicial killings. We're not saying that this is exactly a case of EJK, but based on the initial information that we gathered, there is a possibility that it may actually fall under the jurisdiction of the AO 35 committee. So in the process of investigation, there will be a determination whether in fact this is a case of EJK. So that is not a final conclusion as yet. This will be borne out by the actual investigation. Anyway, for now, the DOJ has created the necessary special investigating teams to investigate each of these incidents that happened in the Calabarzon area, as well as the recent killing of a labor leader. And so all of these special investigating teams have already been constituted, and sad to say that their movements are somehow restricted by the ongoing situation. We are under ECQ. But they have started working, and they will submit their initial reports to me at the soonest possible time.
Yeah.
So
Would you have any,
it's now in place, Melo.
Yes. Would you have any update on the PDEA PNP shooting?
Oh, according to the NBI chief, Melo, the acting chief, he will be submitting very soon a report on that encounter between the PDEA and the PNP. They have already wound up their investigation on the matter, and they will be submitting the progress report very soon. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you very much. Secretary Harry, I just have one last request for tomorrow.
Melo, I'm sorry, but you've exceeded the number of questions.
If it is possible for you to invite the SWD, because I've been getting questions from senior citizens on the rollout of the assistance to senior citizens by DSWD and the local government.
We will.
Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you, Melo. We go now to Yusek Roque again, please.
Yes, Secretary, tanong ni Laila Salaveria na Inquirer for Yusek Berhere. Yung first question niya, nasagot na po. Second question, could you give us an update on the hiring of additional healthcare workers? How many additional workers would the DOH need to cope with the surge in cases, and is it having problems in getting applicants?
Yes, Yusek Roque, the emergency hiring is ongoing. We've started this last year, and up to now, we are still doing that. We have already able to hire 7,000 plus workers. But for this specific increase in the number of cases right now, especially in the NCR Plus bubble, we have downloaded funds to our hospital so that they can do the direct hiring, so that the process would be much faster because they need the healthcare workers the soonest possible time. As to how many, it would depend on the hospital, how many workers they are needing for now. They have the money and they can hire the healthcare workers. Unfortunately, the challenge still would be the uptake. We have the money to hire, but not many healthcare workers are heeding the call, maybe because of reasons of fear, and some are really deployed already in other industries.
Thank you, Yusek Berhere. For Secretary Roque, a question from Laila Salaveria. After Secretary Lorenzana asked Chinese ships to leave Julian Felipe Reef, China said the reef is part of Nansha Island and has been the traditional fishing grounds of Chinese fishermen. How does Malacanang respond to this?
I think that's been asked and answered. No? We will not give up even a single inch of our national territory or our exclusive economic zone. And we hope that the friendly relations will result to a peaceful resolution of this latest impasse.
Did the Chinese ambassador mention that the reef belongs to China when he met with President Duterte?
I read the transcript. Wala naman pong sinabing ganun, but of course, the spokesperson of China has said what you mentioned. No? And I think Secretary Lorenzana was correct in pointing out that we consider that area as part also of Philippine territory and exclusive economic zone.
Thank you, Secretary Roque.
Yes, we go to Pia Renado Frappler, please.
Hello, Secretary. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Sir, just two questions for you and then one question for Secretary Guevara. Sir, we've heard people dying while waiting for hospital treatment and people desperately searching for hospital rooms for their loved ones. May we ask, why did this happen? Why was the government not ready for the surge as evidenced by the one hospital command, diba, parang being swarmed and not being able to handle the calls, and then the fact that hospitals are lacking in beds? I mean, isn't this the whole point of a quarantine classification system? How come the government wasn't ready?
Yusek Verhere, please.
Yes, Pia, it's not really that we are not ready, but really the increase in the number of cases was something that was not really expected because of the, as we have said, the major contributor to this increase in the number of cases are the variants. And these variants are have this increased transmissibility of 6 to 9 times. So in a normal situation, like if we do not have the variants, we are prepared because we were able to reach that mandated 20% or 30% in private facilities for the number of COVID beds. Unfortunately, the variants have increased much faster, and the spread has been tremendous. That's why the number of cases have increased this much.
But we don't really blame just the variants for this. And even if the variants were the only reason for this, aren't we also responsible for stopping the spread of those variants in the first place? I mean, that's why we implemented the travel bans, and then we had other measures because of these variants. I mean, why weren't we prepared for the variants themselves?
Precisely the point. The minimum health protocols has to be complied with. And as what we have observed and based on how we have analyzed things, we have seen that there has been this decline in the compliance to minimum health protocols. And the root cause of the problem would be this compliance to health protocols. So if you are not complying and the compliance is low, the variants would easily spread. And that is what happened to all of us. Now, with regard to the healthcare utilization, we are prepared, and target of having this 20% or 30% allocation for the beds are there. Unfortunately, the system or the organization of the system, as we say, where patients flock the hospitals because of their fear and panic, even though these patients have mild symptoms or asymptomatic symptoms. So this is one of the things that we are trying to address right now by having this triaging with the local government so that we can be able to manage this.
All right. And then last question for Secretary Roque. Sir, you mentioned the 3-hour meeting between IATF, ES, and Senator Bongo. Sir, may we ask who called this meeting and what were the ES's primary concerns in the meeting?
It was just operational, trying to find out what else can be done to assist the Department of Health.
Bakit, sir, may need pa for this additional meeting when usually it's just the IATF who discusses things with, like, on these issues?
Because we always want to serve the public better. Okay? Thank you po. Thank you, Pia.
Last question po for Secretary Guevara po sana. Okay lang po ba?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Justice Secretary Guevara, this is from Lian Buwan. Her question is, in last year's ECQ, you spoke from Malacanang and cited RA 11332 and Article 151 as basis to arrest without warrant. We saw that happen, and in this ECQ, what's the DOJ signal? Should police continue to arrest without warrant those caught outside, or should they just be sent home?
Well, you know, Pia, we discussed that during the last IATF meeting. And I informed the IATF that the better legal basis for enforcing itong mga health protocols would be the local ordinances that have been issued by the local government units, because these are very direct to the point, no? Yung statutes like the mandatory reporting of notifiable diseases, meron doong provision on non-cooperation. But, you know, medyo hindi siya shoot, hindi siya talaga very exact to the actual violation. Kaya nga, we are relying more on the ordinances issued by the local government units rather than a nationwide general statute like the RA 11332 or the mandatory reporting. So that's what I told them, and I also recommended that in the enforcement, in the stricter enforcement of our ordinances, that our LGUs consider the possibility of imposing na lamang the penalty of community service, no, for those who will continue to violate our ordinances, no, rather than in prison or rather than putting them in jail or fining them, kasi nga ay talaga mahirap na ang buhay sa mga. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, back to you, Secretary, please.
Yes, question from Ian Cruz ng GMA News po for Secretary Roque. Sinabi daw po ni Vice President Leni Robredo na okay naman na mag-ECQ pero sana raw po ay detalyado at nag-ooperate na may specific objectives. Kung hindi raw, paano masusukat na nagtatagumpay tayo?
Sinagot na po yan ni Yusek Vergere, yung mga gagawin natin, kung bakit it is not business as usual, yung mas mainting pong PIDTR at meron pong score sheet na binigay po sa ating mga lokal na pamahalaan para magkaroon po ng self-assessment ang ating mga lokal na pamahalaan.
Yung second question po niya, sinagot niyo na rin po yung pahayag ni Mayor Marcelino Chodoro ng Marikina. Question for Dr. Rabi. What doable measures can you recommend the Philippine government in order to have sufficient quarantine facilities?
The issue is that patients or suspected contacts need to be quarantined. Now, what we are seeing from early on in the increase that we are seeing now is that due to delays in confirmation of diagnosis, we find that many people in the same household are already infected by the time a diagnosis is confirmed. So what would be best is, unless people are having comorbidities or of elderly age, it's best that everybody that where we have confirmed cases quarantine in their homes because they are at low risk, and this way we will prevent unnecessary congestion in the outpatient units and unnecessarily burdening the healthcare workers in the hospitals. This will provide them the ability to care for those people who are most sick. If there are limitations in quarantining at home because you have somebody who is elderly or who has comorbidities, then it's best that such people are quarantined in TTMFs. Now, there are several options. We have the mega TTMFs, we have the smaller TTMFs, and we also know that there are hotels being used as quarantine centers. So there are several options where people can be quarantined early and rapidly to protect more people being infected. And this needs to happen rather fast because of the increased transmissibility of these new variants, which we believe are circulating in the NCR and particularly in parts of Marikina. So if we can do that quickly, we would potentially prevent new people getting infected, and that would then reduce the number of people requiring intensive care and severe management in hospitals.
Thank you, Dr. Rabi. Secretary Roque.
Yes. Yes, Hannah Sancho, please, of SMNI.
Hi, sir. Good afternoon. Sir, ayon po sa Employers Confederation of the Philippines na tinatayang nasa bilyon-bilyong piso po yung mawawala sa ekonomiya ng bansa, yung sa pagpapatupad po natin ng 1-week extension ng ECQ po dito sa NCR+. Ano pong tugon natin dito sa private sector, sir? Sinasabi din po nila na hindi po daw kinuha ang kanilang opinion dito sa pag-extend po natin, sir.
Nako, magpapatunay ako sa iyo na ang economic team po talaga ay pinaglaban po at pinaglalaban pa rin ang mga pribadong sektor. At ito nga po ay patunay na o pinapatunayan ng cost-benefit analysis kung saan sinabi po talaga ni Acting Secretary Carl Chua na bilyon-bilyon ang nawawala sa ating ekonomiya kada araw ng ECQ. Pero wala po tayong opsyon kung hindi magdeklara ng ECQ kasi punong-puno na nga po ang mga hospital natin. So alam po ng lahat sa IATF yung halaga ng pagsasarado. Alam po natin na mas maraming nagugutom. Alam po natin na 2.1 billion ang nawawala sa NCR plus 1 kada araw po ng MECQ yan. So mas malaki pong nawawala kapag ECQ. Pero yun nga po, kinakailangan nating paghandaan na alagaan yung mga magkakasakit ng seryoso at kritikal.
Pero hindi naman natin isinasantabi yung private sector, sir, no? Sa tuwing nag-decide po tayo na magkakaroon tayo ng ECQ.
Hindi po. Naku, napakaselan po ng desisyon nito. Sabi nga po ni Secretary Chua, ang ating goal is to achieve total health. Hindi lang po na hindi madapuan ng COVID, kung hindi kinakailangan maiwasan din ang pagkagutom.
Sir, ano pong response po natin kay Senator Lacson? Sinabi po niya sa kanyang pahayag na the country's response to the COVID-19 pandemic appears to be on autopilot with no one in charge. He also said that the coronavirus has gone berserk, sir.
Ay, nasagot ko na po yan kanina. No? Emergency medicine, according to Dr. Herbosa, importante ibigay ang mga pangangailangan ng bansa. At yung pagpapalit ng liderato ay pwede po yung isang tabi. At I emphasize po, no, walang isang tao po na responsable dito sa COVID response. It's an entire government approach.
Thank you, sir. Sir, last question for you, Sir Harry po.
Go ahead, please.
Sir Harry, yung Lung Center of the Philippines, hindi na po sila tumatanggap ng COVID-19 patients. Paano po natin i-address, Doc, na for how long po silang hindi makakatanggap ng mga COVID-19 patients po?
Well, right now, as we have mentioned a while ago in my presentation, there are interim measures and immediate measures that we are going to employ. The very first one would be for us to be able to extract mild and asymptomatic patients from our hospitals so that we can further decongest. And looking at the census of our hospitals, we have about almost 400 plus mild and asymptomatic cases now currently admitted in the different government hospitals. So we analyzed if we can extract them, put them in facilities which are also where they can be comfortable and they will be managed as well by medical practitioners. We will be able to free up the space in our hospitals. So our hospitals may temporarily not be able to admit patients with COVID because they are full, but as soon as they can discharge some of their patients through this Oplan Kalinga and also maybe the patient have recovered already, they would soon admit again patients.
How soon po ito? Like, for a few days lang po ba hindi sila pwedeng tumanggap?
Well, if we can be able to set up this system that we have said, that this immediate measure of transferring patients from the hospital to the isolation facilities within this week, and then we can be able to decongest. Second would be if they would have patients who are already recovering and they can be able to be transferred or discharged already to be sent home, then they can open up already. A patient usually remains in a hospital if they are COVID positive and they have severe symptoms. Usually they stay in the hospital for 14 to 21 days. But if they have mild or they are asymptomatic and they are just being monitored, it would just take about 6 to 7 days.
So, last question, Doc. Do you think by April 11, Doc, yung capacity ng mga hospitals natin, yung capacity ng mga hospitals natin na handling COVID cases po ay magiging luluwag na po ba by the end, na matapos ng extension ng COVID?
Yes, we are very much hopeful. That is the hope, that is our objective, and that should be something that should be done so that we can be able to manage more patients and we can be able to transfer those patients who are not really requiring hospitalization. So that is the hope, and hopefully before that time we are able to set up the immediate measures already so that we can see the further decongestion of our hospitals.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Secretary.
Okay, Yusek Roque, wala na po tayong tanong. I'm sorry to say that we cannot prolong this press briefing, no? So if I may just call on Joseph Morong, please, and then yung mga ibang tanong, ipadala na lang sa atin for answers. Yes,
Hi,
Joseph
sir.
Morong, please. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Hi, sir. Good morning to your guest, Secretary Guevara. How are you doing? Dr. Rabi and Yusek Ferreira. Can I go first to Yusek Ferreira, please?
Go ahead, please.
Ma'am, I just have a couple of questions. I was going to ask you about the strategy of the government, but then I saw and I listened kanina na tama po ba yung basa ko? Ang immediate na gagawin natin yun is to decongest the hospitals and strengthen yung contact tracing and the isolation. Are those the two immediate things that we are going to do under the ECQ? And are those things available to meet yung pong parameters that you mentioned earlier dun sa sagot niyo po kay Tricia? And just to manage expectations, sir, ma'am, from ECQ, ang next step po natin will be MECQ, not GCQ.
Yes, Joseph. First, yes, ito po yung mga pangunahing dapat nating gawin. Immediate measures, unang-una to further decongest the hospitals. No? Yan yung pinaka-importante sa atin ngayon. Pangalawa, for us to address the number of cases, we have to do this immediate isolation, immediate tracing, immediate testing, and immediate isolation of the individuals who are affected or who have been exposed to this virus. So by doing that, we can see and we can help in the response by reducing the number of cases and improving on the healthcare system. So the second question would be, our experts have recommended that the shift to this community quarantine classification should be gradual. So it should not jump from ECQ and then to GCQ. We should do it gradually based on the assessment that we will do per week based on the IATF agreement.
And if we're able to meet the parameters, ma'am, by next week, after April 11, MECQ tayo probably?
That will be the hope, and that is the objective why we are doing all of these measures for this week.
Ma'am, can I stay with you for a little while? Ma'am, kasi kanina po sa presentation niyo din sa DOH briefing, you mentioned that yung pong effect ng ECQ can be felt in terms of the number of cases 10 days after the ECQ, and in terms of healthcare utilization, 2 to 3 weeks or 3 to 4 weeks. Would you rather, ma'am, now we stay in ECQ and achieve this first, the lowering of the number of cases and decongesting our HCU before natin i-release yung NCR sa lower community quarantine?
As I've said, it will be based on the assessment. And as we have said a while ago, we won't see the changes from this ECQ strategy until about 10 days after, based on the last experience that we've had. But we also have some indicators already that we can use in order for us to determine if we can continue on this kind of restrictions or we can lift it. And that would be the management of our healthcare system. So sabi natin, kapag nakita natin yung ICU beds natin, naka-decongest natin kahit papano, nakakapag-accept na tayo uli ng mas maayos na sa ating mga ospital. And also we have seen that the LGUs have intensified their PDITR, like contact tracing within 24 hours, isolating them within 24 hours. And then that's the time that we can use that as a basis, notwithstanding the number of cases. And as I've said, the healthcare utilization rate that we want to reduce by as much as 60%.
Okay. Ma'am, nung pong February, we started to note yung mga new variants, no? In our assessment, in hindsight, ma'am, were we not quick enough to identify those new variants and contain them such that we would be able to avoid this present situation na kalat na sila?
Well, in my opinion, we have been able to detect early on. That's why we were able to close our borders before reaching January of 2020. If you will remember, December, we closed our borders to these countries where we have identified UK variants. And then we were able to do this surveillance system where we were able to trace individuals with variants from CAR and the other areas. And we were able to set up or do restrictions for us to be able to contain the spread. Unfortunately, it is not really just that factor. We need to look at the behavior also of people. We also need to look at the compliance to protocol. So with all of these factors combining, we have seen that the variants have spread this much. And here in NCR, it has, we have porous borders across cities, and that is also a contributing factor. That's why the variants have spread this much.
All right, ma'am. Thank you for your time. Can I go to Dr. Rabi for a little while, ma'am? Dr. Rabi, good afternoon, sir. Sir, can I get an update, sir, on the AstraZeneca vaccine? Because it was scheduled on March 24 to 26, 979 doses. What happened to those? Do we have an update on whether this will be delivered at all to the Philippines?
Yes, thank you for the question, Joseph. It's an important question which I alluded to because of the global vaccine shortage. There will be a delay. The agreed quantity, which was 920,000 vaccine doses, will come, but because of the shortage, what we have been informed is that we may need to expect a reduced quantity, which may come over the next few weeks. But eventually, as production picks up, we will deliver on the 20% stock, 20% of vaccines to cover 20% of the population. So this is the agreement that COVAX has with the Philippine government, and we are still committed to do that. We believe that when production picks up in the late second quarter, third, fourth quarters, we will be able to deliver.
All right. Sir, thank you for
Thank you,
your time.
Joseph.
Secretary Roque, just quick questions
That's
for you, sir.
4 questions already.
Quick lang from Dr. Vergere. Next week, can we expect MECQ?
It depends on whether or not our objectives are met as far as PDITR is concerned and as far as hospital care utilization. Okay? Thank you very much, Joseph.
Ba't wala pong, sorry, curiosity lang, but wala pong talk to the nation address Presidente tonight? Does he have a schedule, a cabinet meeting or something?
Wala po, no? But normally naman po yan, Mondays or Wednesdays. And Wednesday is what appears in my calendar. Okay?
Right,
thank you very much, Joseph.
Secretary.
Yes? Yes.
I just want to thank you mga kasama ko sa review committee sa water concessions. More specifically, si ES Medjalea of the Office of the President, Secretary Dominguez of the DOF, Chief State Counsel George Orta of the Department of Justice, Solicitor General Joe Calida, and Justice Elpidio Vega of the Office of the Government Corporate Counsel, and their undersecretaries, and most especially Presidential Advisor on Flagship Projects, Vince Dison, who facilitated all of these discussions. Thank you, Sec Harry.
On my part naman po, I will ask for the President's guidance because na talaga po ako dati na magsampa ng kaso. I will find out what the next order of the President is now that there is already a revised concession agreement. Now, Yusek Roque, meron pa bang tatlong last questions? Pwede bang pakibasa na yung tatlo para sagutin na lahat yung tatlong questions? Go ahead, please.
Okay, Secretary, pero yung mga tanong po ni Ian Tintong ko ay halos pareho din po. Tanong po ni Cedric Castillo, any update daw po for Yusek Vergere, alleged 1,000 per hour na rent sa tent ng isang ospital para sa COVID patients. Sabi Bayan muna, Representative Ferdinand Gaites says isasagdit niya sa House Committee on Health ang pangalan ng hospital. Iniimbestigahan na po ba ng DOH ito?
And the last question please, para wala na tayong tanong, para maubos ang tanong.
Tanong po ni Raul Dancel of Straits Times, do you see our ongoing world war with China over Julian Felipe Reef jeopardizing future vaccine shipment for Sinovac and Sinopharm?
Okay, Yusek Vergere, yung 1,000 daw po per hour. Per hour ba yun o per day?
Per hour daw po.
Per hour.
Yes, sir. The case is being investigated by our Hospital Oversight Board and we will provide information as soon as they already have results.
Doon naman po sa huling tanong, ay wala naman pong world war. No? Malinaw po ang sinasabi ng Presidente. Meron po tayong malapit na pagkakaibigan. Hindi po dahilan itong mga fishing vessels para tayo po ay magkagera and we will resolve this peacefully. Okay, dahil wala na po tayong tanong, maraming salamat po sa ating mga naging panauhin, si Secretary Maynard Guevara, si Dr. Rabi ng WHO, Dr. Rabindra Abeyasinge, at siyempre po si DOH Yusek Rosario Vergere. Maraming salamat din po kay Yusek Roque at maraming salamat sa lahat ng ating mga kasama dito sa Malacanang Press Corps. At dahil kahapon po ay Pasko ng Pagkabuhay, sa ngalan po ng inyong Presidente, ito po ang Spokes Harry Roque na nag-iiwan po ng mga lyrics sa aking paboritong kanta na kinakanta sa ating simbahan. Because He lives, I can face tomorrow. Because He lives, all fear is gone. Because I know He holds the future and life is worth the living just because He lives. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat.
Matinding kalaban ng COVID.
Ayokong makahawa.
At mahawa.
Pero kailangan ko na magtrabaho.
Kaya di ako magiging pabaya.
Di matigas ang aking ulo.
Iingatan ko ang aking sarili.
Para maingatan ang pamilya ko.
Ito ang ambag ko.
Ako.
Ikaw.
Lahat tayo.
Sama-sama nating
Mayaangat ang bayan.
Basta't sama-sama tayo.
Sa pag-ingat buhay.
Para sa ating hanap buhay.
Mask, hugas, iwas.